Welcome to the Church of Now podcast, where we believe kids and students and young adults can make a difference now in the moment. We don't just ask them to be the future of the church, but we believe that they are the church of now. We're going to be talking with ministry leaders about what it looks like to inspire and tell young adults and kids and students what it looks like to make a difference now in the church. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the podcast. Hey, welcome to the podcast, the Church of Now podcast. Super excited for our guest today, Ruby Kedney. She lives out in California and is a connections minister, connections coordinator at Shepherd Church. And maybe some of you all have heard of this church and their leaders there. But Ruby, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm excited and love what you guys are doing. So I grew up as a pastor's kid. So always, at church, running around there all the time, as all the pastors' kids out there can relate to that. I grew up in Southern California. My parents actually planted a church out here, Discovery Church. So I kind of grew up getting to see what it looks like to begin a church. Started off, in a movie theater, worked its way up into a building. So that was a really neat way to grow up and see that. And then my dad moved around to various churches as well as I grew up through high school. And then college came around and I really felt the Lord leading me into ministry and wanting to teach and lead and preach God's word. So I graduated from Hope International University last year. So shout out any HIU people listening.
There you go.
So I graduated with my degree in church ministry just about a year ago, which is crazy. And then now I get to do full-time ministry. I got married in there as well. So that's been fun. We got a puppy during COVID,
Nice.
all the COVID puppies. So we're just having fun with that and enjoying married life and working at the church and stuff.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. Tell us about your ministry, your position, and everything that you do at the church. And then I guess a second part of that, I know that you do some speaking and you're with young adults a lot and maybe even some students. What do you feel young adults need to hear? So that's a two-part. Tell us about your ministry, and then, what do you feel young adults need to hear right now?
Yeah, great questions. So my role right now at Shepherd Church is the connections coordinator. So what that really means is just helping people make connections. And any new person that comes into our church, I want to help them feel connected and involved. Because if you've grown up or been at a large church, it can feel intimidating, right? To walk in and you don't know where to go, how to make connections. So I help them, join a life group or get involved serving, meet some friends. So I do the guest experience ministry as well as Next Steps class, which is just a first step for people looking to grow in their faith or to get connected and make some friends. So I do that every Sunday morning as well. And I love it. It's a really fun role because I get to do what I love and also just help people feel valued and connected at the church. And then the second part of that question of what do young adults need to hear right now? I love that question because I do get to be around young adults a lot at church and through various speaking events that I'm honored to be a part of as well. And I think the main thing, especially in this season, is just knowing that you are so valuable. And I think a lot of the value has been overlooked. I mean, this past year has been incredibly hard, especially on students being online or not being at school and being isolated from their community. So just knowing that you are so valuable, and whether you're sitting in your room doing school online or you're back in person, your voice matters. Even if it's a small voice, it's just with your family or it's with your whole campus or your job or whatever that looks like, that your voice is still so powerful and meaningful.
Yeah, that's great. I want to ask you this question. You said you were a pastor's kid, so you grew up in the church. You knew what it was like to grow up in the church. Tell me a little bit about your experience growing up in the church. Did you have opportunities to lead and do things like that? And also, you are our first guest that is a woman on the podcast, and we are so excited for that. I know I firmly believe in women in ministry. I believe God calls us all to use our gifts and our talents for His kingdom. And so I know it's probably a little different for you, and maybe it wasn't, but for some women growing up in the church, maybe it can be a struggle. And so hopefully that wasn't your experience. But I know people, especially in like East Tennessee where I live, that can be their story.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your experience. What kind of opportunities did you have to grow and develop when you were growing up in the church?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to my mind when you ask that question is actually this internship that my middle school pastor did. Okay.
Hmm.
So he did an internship for middle schoolers, which is crazy because we were 12 in middle school.
Yeah.
But I remember he had us do it during the summer and it was very loose base. He just had us prepare for weekends and, took us out to lunch and talked to us about what ministry looked like. And I just absolutely loved it. I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. I did not want to miss it. I was like planning my outfits ahead of time. Like I was so excited for this internship in sixth grade that I
Right.
was a part of, and that the pastor of the time would take, an hour or two out of his day to let us help set up the stage. Like that was the coolest thing in the
Yeah.
world. What? You'd let me set it up, or I could do the announcements for church on Sunday. Like that blew my mind.
Yeah.
So thankfully, the church I grew up in Southern California did really believe in the next generation, and they wanted us to lead, and they gave internships. And I remember even seeing young adults leading worship or helping with announcements and communion and things like that. And I loved that. I thought that was amazing. Growing up, then flash forward to like high school time, I really started to learn, okay, I really enjoy teaching, and I think God has gifted me in that area. But man, I don't see many women in that area. And so it was very scary to step into because there are women. It just was not in the context I was in. The churches I was around at that time did not really champion women that great. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll just wait on that. I don't know what that looks like. As I got into college, I started getting more opportunities and having wonderful women in ministry that were older than me speak into my life and say, hey, Ruby, let me help you get this opportunity. Let me pour into you. And we had like a club on campus called Women in Ministry. So getting to hear from various speakers and other women pastors, it just fired me up. I was like, oh my gosh, my joy is back. This is what the Lord wants me to do. It may be a little scary, but I can step into this because of the girl coming after me, the middle schooler right now. I want to show her, hey, you got this. You can do this. And women have a place and they belong in the church and they belong teaching and using their giftings, whatever they may be. So that was college really kind of reignited, I guess, that excitement in me. And I did an internship through another church, East Side. I love East Side Church, and they really believe in women in ministry. And they actually gave me an opportunity to speak main stage, which I was so freaking out. But they gave me that opportunity, in college as a woman. And they said,
Yeah.
hey, we believe in you. Women can preach. Get up there. You got this. And it was amazing. Like just that experience and the fact that they believed in me and championed me meant more to me than they will probably ever know. It was
Yeah.
awesome.
That's awesome. I had a couple students. We went to CIY a couple weeks ago, and we took only girls. It's just how it worked out.
Yeah.
And so we had a lot of conversations about what it looks like to live out their faith. And as of right now, none of those girls that went on the trip want to go into ministry, but they have a mission field every day, right?
Yeah.
A lot of them felt scared, and they didn't know how to live out their daily life with their faith. Because they might see somebody like a Sadie Robertson or somebody that they see on Instagram who seems to have the quote unquote perfect Christian life, and
Totally.
as we both know, that's not a real thing. The perfect Christian life is not the real thing. So there's people listening to this podcast. There's probably people in your church specifically, especially here in mine, because I just had a conversation about this a lot with our students. There are people out there, there are women out there who maybe feel like they can't even live that daily life of ministry. What would you have to say to a young girl or a young adult who may feel that way?
Yeah. I love that question. I just want, I think, to just encourage you that no matter the context you're in, you can lead where you're at. So whether you are stay-at-home mom, you just had a little baby, or you are working professionally and you're running a company,
Yep.
whatever end of the spectrum you find yourself on, you have a context to lead. Leading your family is equally as important as leading an organization or leading a church. Those both have such value in the kingdom of God, and just being able to lead in whatever context you are in. So I would just encourage you, go read stories in the Bible. Go read about Phoebe and different women that the Lord empowered to lead, and he had them alongside of him, and he didn't shy away because, oh, you're a woman. He encouraged them. He wanted them to lead. And I see those stories, and I just think there's no denying it, that whatever context that looks like. And your leadership style may be different. It doesn't have to look the same as the girl next to you, or Christine Kane or Sadie Robertson, right? These like amazing, like, I will never be Sadie Robertson. Good. You don't have to be Sadie, because you're you, and you can be an amazing mom or CEO or pastor or whatever you want to do, and just do it well and lead in your own context.
Right. I love that. So to all of the females out there looking to grow in their faith, just be you, right? And I know that's a lot more difficult than maybe it seems, but just be you and grow in that relationship with God in the way that you do that, right? Love that. Let's go to the next question here. This is the Church of Now podcast. We believe that everybody has a part to play. But when I say that we are all the Church of Now, what does that mean to you?
That means to me that you and we're leading right now, for lack of better words. You hear you are the church of the future sometimes, and that has great intent and heart behind it, but it can be very ambiguous of, well, when's the future? When does that start? When does the magic baton pass, to the next person? But it's now, you can lead right now in whatever, like I said, whatever context that looks like. And just waiting around for the future, I think sometimes that doesn't empower people as much as the intent behind it may be, but rather giving opportunities currently is much more empowering.
Yeah, for sure. So what would you say to a listener who may have been told they're a part of the church of the future? Or, we've had conversations on this podcast recently. You think of older generations where maybe they are told, hey, you are the church of the past, why don't you get on board? What would you say to a listener who maybe have been told they're not a part of the church of now, and how would you tell them that they have a place now?
Yeah. Well, I would just first of all say I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that you've been told that. And that's not the heart of Jesus, because you see the disciples were most likely very, very young adults, and they were tasked with much more than I have on my plate, or a lot of us have on our plate. They spread Jesus's story around the world. So no matter how young you are or how old you are, you're not disqualified from leading or being in the kingdom of God just because of your age. That's no biblical grounds for that at all. So I'm sorry if you've been told that, and just to encourage you that you are the church of now. You don't have to just keep waiting for that one day or that future day, but start finding those opportunities. So for the generation that would be above you and I, Matt, is just extend those opportunities. I know sometimes it's scary because it's like, well, what if they mess it up? Or what if they do communion wrong? And they might, right? Like I've definitely made mistakes when I did an internship and they let me do it and I completely butchered it. And I was like, man, I totally messed that up, or I did the light cue wrong, or I said the wrong thing. But it was a safe environment for me to fail in. It was, okay, well, let me help you learn. And I had different leaders or people come alongside me and say, here's what, we did wrong, and let's try and correct that. And then I didn't make that mistake in the future when I got a job working at a church. So just extending those opportunities will be incredibly empowering to the Gen Z, millennials, because when there's no opportunity, there's no way. Like if you don't extend any opportunities, then we're never going to learn. So give those opportunities so that learning can actually happen.
For sure. If I didn't have opportunities, I wouldn't be where I am now. Right. I wouldn't be in ministry. I wouldn't be doing what I do. And I'm thankful for, just like you, having those opportunities growing up in middle and high school to speak or to really just make mistakes. That's how we grow.
We've all made them. We've all done stupid stuff, and then we learn from it. So.
Hey, I still make mistakes. It happens,
come on.
right? I probably will until I die. So that's just part of life. Um, so how can we help every generation? Obviously, I think a lot of the focus for this podcast, or what some people may think, is for the Gen Z millennial age, which the millennial age I think now goes into like the 40s, and so that kind of
Yeah.
blows my mind. But when we think about the Boomer generation, or every single generation that we have in the church, and I believe there's 5 in the church right now, how can we get all these generations to realize that we're all the church of now, and that we're all together? Like we've got to kind of rally behind each other and do this thing. So how can we help churches, or sorry, how can we help generations do this and realize we're the church of now? And maybe how does your church do that?
Yeah. So specifically at our church, I think they do a good job of just giving opportunities to young students. So we have various internships and our youth program. There's like a lot of churches have, right? Like a small group program, a
Right.
discipleship program, and having that leader, be a college student, or maybe they're 60 years old and they're a grandma and
Mm.
they're leading a group of sixth graders. I think it's so important to have that. I think a lot of times in youth ministry, you want the college age leaders because they're fun, they're energetic. But I think we should also include, and they have such a wisdom and honor, is the grandparents, the parents, to be leaders. Because I think when we do that, going back to what you said, Matt, that really unifies all of us. Because then you have, the 12-year-old, the 20-year-old, the 40-year-old, the 60-year-old all in a room together
Yep.
and kind of talking about life or going through the sermon series or worship or whatever that may look like. And it's really unifying because we all realize, hey, okay, we're all the church, like you said.
Hmm.
Every single one of us, even this crazy 12-year-old that's bouncing off the wall, or
Yep.
this sweet older woman, every one of them is the church. Like it shouldn't be, okay, it gets cut off at this point. Sorry, you're
Yeah.
out. None of us, I think, want that to be the case. So just getting all in the same room, having those like student takeover weekends. I've seen
Yeah.
churches do that a lot. And oh my gosh, it's so encouraging to watch them lead and have them preach and lead worship and do the communion meditation. And I think that encourages a lot of the older generation because it really, I've heard from people that it really restores their faith in the church, is seeing these younger people really
Yeah.
leading and being the church of the now. It gives them such life to see we're in good hands.
Mhm.
The church will go on. God will provide the right leaders for all time for the future.
Yeah. Love that. Want to end up our conversation with this question. What is your best or funniest ministry story that you have?
Yeah. So, I mean, I get to work sometimes at the information counter on the weekends, which a lot of churches have those, right? And I get some really funny stories, and people ask the randomest things. But one of my best, I guess, would probably actually recently is I just got to experience like a full circle of this Next Steps ministry. So I
Mm.
started the ministry at this church about a year ago, and it was on Zoom at first because everyone was on
Yep.
Zoom. And then now it's come to in person. So I've done it Next Steps in person in June, July, and August. And so I had some people come to me from the June session this Sunday. And they're like, hey, Ruby, how are you? Catching up. And then they said, I just want to let you know that my table group that we sat at during Next Steps in June, we actually decided to form a life group together. And we went to the beach this week and we had a little picnic, and where all our kids are getting to know each other and we're just really becoming friends. And it genuinely like brought tears to my eyes. I was
Yeah.
like, sorry, like that just makes me so emotional because that's what it's all about. And seeing that come to fruition after a lot of Zoom hard work and like, is this even connecting? I'm sitting there like, is anyone even getting anything out of this?
Right.
To hear people come back and say, no, this is working and I'm making friendships and I feel loved and valued meant the world to me. And I will be riding that high for a while. When you hear those good stories in ministry, it just like keeps you going. You're like,
It does.
yes, why I do it.
It does for sure. That's awesome. I lied to you and said that was the last thing, but I want to bring something. I want to bring something else up. I do that all
Let's
the
do
time. So the first time that I ever heard about you and then met you a little later on, I had heard a story about you when you were 16. And you inspired me to do the same thing that you did I guess I was 18 years old at that point. But tell me a little bit about that, because as we talk about the Church of Now stuff, at 16, you were the Church of Now, right? And you have the opportunity to do something really cool. You don't have to give all the details. I know that they can be a lot, but just tell us about what you did, because I'm hoping that it can inspire, some of our listeners who are younger to make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's crazy to think that that's how me and you met, was
Yeah.
through that CIY experience. So I got a really cool opportunity when I was 16 years old, or just about to turn 16.
Hmm.
I worked at our church that I was at the time, had an organization that they partnered with called One Mission. One Mission is amazing. Like, go check them out,
Hmm.
onemission.org. And they work with various countries all around the world, and they provide housing and just different opportunities for people living in poverty. And so I had been working with them, just doing some different fun mission trips with my church and my youth group. And then they approached me and said, "Hey, what do you think about starting a campaign? So for your birthday, you would ask for money to build a home for this family instead of getting birthday gifts." And I was like, "Man, that sounds like a really neat opportunity. Let me think about it." And I'm praying about it. And this was the first time they had done anything like this. This was the campaign that they wanted to start to kind of raise more awareness and funds so that eventually more students or adults could do this. I was going to be the first. So I was like, okay, well, I better do it right because I was the first person to do it. And I'm 15.
Yep.
And then they say, okay, I'm like, I'm in, I want to do it. And they go, oh, also, we're also going to have CIY, Christ in Youth Camps, film it, and it's going to be shown at every CIY across the whole United States. And I was like, what in the world? Like, okay, some pressure is on. But I love CIY. I'd grown up going to that camp
Hmm.
as well. So it was two organizations that I just really loved. So I said yes. I ended up raising over $13,000, which was absolutely crazy. I think the goal was around 5 or 6,000. So
Hmm.
more than doubled it because the Lord provided. And I just started posting, using social media, telling my friends, hey, let's raise money. Please donate to this. And then at my 16th birthday, they're filming me, doing this whole experience. And I'm celebrating that God helped raise all this money, and they're going to have a home and their life will be changed because of the safety that this home provides. Then they tell me, hey, we're actually going to get on a plane and go meet this family tomorrow.
Oh,
And
wow.
I had no idea. And so we threw all my stuff together. Me and my dad went to Nicaragua, met the Gonzalez family, spent a few days with them, saw their house actually being built. It was the craziest experience ever. And I was just 16. And I ended up getting to speak at various CIYs after that and share, some of my experience of what that looked like and how it changed my heart, because it really did as a 16-year-old, just remembering there's so much more than my daily struggle in school or in class, changing my worldview and perspective by getting to go to Nicaragua. So for anyone that finds themselves 16 listening to this, or younger, older, you can do those hard things. And it may feel really scary and intimidating, but believe me, I was really scared and intimidated. And then God ended up blowing it out of the water,
Yep.
raising over $13,000, getting to speak at conferences at 16 years old, which most people never get to do,
Yep.
and kind of also igniting that passion in me of teaching and
Yeah.
preaching. So it really catapulted a lot. So just trust, if you're leaning into something, you never know. God may be going to blow your mind with it 10 years from now.
Yeah. That's so awesome. And I had seen your video at CIY and went home and said I was going to do it and didn't for a whole year. I pushed it off. I was like, no way I'm going to do
Yeah.
this. And the next year I went back to CIY and I was like, all right, we need to do this thing. And I raised 8,000 and for a home in
Let's
Nicaragua
go.
as well. But it's just cool to see, when students are inspired by their students, especially at 16 years old. And I love what you said. It wasn't you that did that; it was God blowing it out of the water,
Yeah.
and all you did was say yes. And so it's cool to see what those opportunities do whenever you say yes to that. Because you were 16, I think we're probably the same age. And so saw your video there. I believe my brother met you like a year later at a conference.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we met, I think, the year after that at a conference. And here we are on a podcast together. So just cool to see those opportunities and see what God will do when we just say yes. And so,
Yeah, so good. It's so true. Just saying yes can lead us to so much more than we could imagine.
for sure. And we never see it in the beginning, but he brings it to us. So love
Absolutely.
that. If you had one more thing to say to our listeners, what would it be?
Let's see. I think I would just end by encouraging you that you are valued. I really feel the Lord
Yeah.
has placed that on my heart, that you have so much value, more than you know. You're listening to this and you're 12 years old, or you're 85 years old.
Hmm.
You matter. You have so much value, and people want to hear your voice. That's something that God is teaching me lately, not in a cocky way, but just, oh, people actually do want to listen to me. Like I literally
Yeah.
told a coworker that the other day. Wow, they actually listen. And she's
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, what do you mean? Of course they do. You're a leader." I'm like, "Oh, I guess I am." Just realizing, step into that. People are listening to you whether you realize it or not. Just lean
Right.
into it.
Yep. I love that. Well, thank you. Thank you for being on the Church of Now podcast. Ruby, it's been an incredible conversation. And I hope our listeners will take something home from this. And so, if you haven't already, you're listening to the podcast on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Give a rating or a like or a review or whatever. And Ruby, thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt. It's awesome.